Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thank you for joining me as we spend the next hour together. As always, I do hope you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. Coming up tonight, we'll be talking about all things related to the election. We'll also discuss the coronavirus and how deadly it's becoming and what we must do to mask up and COVID down. And we'll be talking about Philadelphia, the unrest that continues there. All that and more coming up on tonight's program. But first, my opening observations. John Lewis, the late, great public servant, John Lewis, once stated this about voting. He said, "The right to vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool or instrument we have in a democratic society." He added, "Let nothing stand in your way to use it so that together we may build a truly more perfect union here in America. Vote, stir up some good trouble. Make sure you do what John Lewis wanted all Americans to do, particularly Black Americans, and that was get out and vote." And those are my opening observations. So my first guest is Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, political commentator and analyst, and she knows exactly what's happening in this campaign to run up towards the presidency. And of course, we have Donald Trump on the ballot as well as Joe Biden. But what's really on the ballot for voters, Avis?
What's on the ballot for voters is their lives. Plain as day. We have one camp that is completely surrendered to the coronavirus by incorrectly claiming victory. And we have another camp that has a clear plan to attack it. What's on the ballot is our very democracy. We have one candidate who is trying to create, in essence, an American apartheid system where he has packed the courts with cronies that's meant to overturn the will of the people. And we have another candidate who wants all the votes to be counted. We have also on the ballot a fight against systemic racism in this nation. We have one candidate who says that he specifically will make it one of the main pillars of his administration to attack systemic racism in this country. And we have the other candidate who claims it doesn't exist. The contrast between these two could not be more stark. And that's exactly why we need to continue turning out early and turning out on election day in order to upend the scourge that has infected the White House.
Now, as you know, there has been record number early voting through all the states. A lot of people turning out.
Yes.
Joe Biden is not taking that for granted. He says that's not enough. I think Democrats are fearful going into this, or at least apprehensive because of what happened during the last election when President Donald Trump was then the candidate, and in the last week turned it all around against Hillary Clinton. But there is a stark difference between Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden in how they campaign. Both candidates, as you know, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, are in Florida today. How important is the Latino vote and the Black vote and the vote of older Americans?
Oh my God, absolutely critical to this election overall, and especially critical to Florida. Florida is a very interesting state in that, first of all, if Donald Trump doesn't win Florida, he doesn't win, period. There is no way that the math works out for him. And so that's why he's desperately trying to go there and trying to specifically woo back the seniors who have left him because, quite frankly, he abandoned them first as it relates to COVID, and trying to do everything he can to maximize the Cuban vote, which is his built-in advantage among the Latinos vote. However, another side of what's going on in Florida that people talk less about is the fact that in 2018, we had on the ballot an initiative that would expand voting rights to formerly incarcerated returning citizens. And though that was fought back against immediately, even after winning at the polls, by having a Republican-controlled legislature and governor pass, in essence, a poll tax to the returning citizens that would preclude their right to vote, there's been a lot of effort to make sure that people could overcome that hurdle. People like LeBron James and Mike Bloomberg have been raising money specifically to pay off people's fines. There's been court battles and over to overturn that specific law. And so there will also be returning citizens who were not even eligible to vote last time, and perhaps not even eligible to vote for years, who will for the first time have their ability to have their say in this election. And so really, if the vote can be maximized specifically among those various demographics, returning citizens, Black voters, Latino voters, older voters in Florida, I really think that at the end of the day, this is going to be an advantage for Biden. And I think he's going to do what President Obama did, and that is carry that state and win the entire election.
We're coming back with much more after the break. And in Pennsylvania, we see that people are protesting in the streets of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do in terms of the election and those who are undecided or those who have already made up their minds in the upper or central Pennsylvania to vote for Donald Trump? And of course, the president stating that what Pennsylvania needs is law and order. And then actually trying to ridicule Joe Biden, saying that he did not condemn the violence. And that was not the truth. Joe
Right.
Biden did, in fact, condemn the violence, but also understood the plight of what's going on in Philadelphia and urge that when he's president, he will work towards police reform.
Absolutely. So I do think that the latest injustice in Philadelphia is the wild card of this particular campaign, particularly as it relates to the state of Pennsylvania, which is a critical state in this election. This is the October surprise that nobody anticipated at all, because we could not have predicted that this would happen at this particular time, just days before the election. And it does make me wonder, what will that do for turnout on election day in Philadelphia, a particular place in the state of Pennsylvania that the Democrats not only have to win, quite frankly, they need to run up the score in Philadelphia in order to overcome the more right-leaning elements in the far western areas of the state and of many of the other suburban areas of the state. And so it makes me wonder just how people are going to turn up and turn out in terms of continuing. I'm not sure when their early voting period ends, but specifically, if this unrest is still going on election day, it does make me wonder, will that impact turnout on election day? I understand that Trump will use this as a rhetorical battering ram against Joe Biden as well. I don't think that'll change many minds. I think that the people who feel the way Trump feels about this, we're going to vote for him anyway. I think the people who understand the broader issues of social justice are pretty hardened in their stances, and that's one of the reasons why they are voting for Joe Biden anyway. But specifically, as important as this state is, I do wonder if that will have some impacts on the vote totals come November 3rd.
Yeah, in fact, many observers are saying instead of seeing young people out in the streets protesting and resorting to looting and things of that nature, it would be better to see them show up at the polls and make their voices heard that way. Before I let you go, got to talk about Jared Kushner in another set of tapes. What is going on? And why would the president refute the science and then make a gamble on the lives of Americans in dispelling the statements from his own scientists on the coronavirus task force?
Well, I would just say birds of a feather flock together. Jared Kushner is a bit of a mysterious figure, I think, to most Americans. I remember when he first came in with Donald Trump as the son-in-law in chief, and he was given all of these responsibilities that were clearly over his head and over his intellectual capabilities. It was months before anyone even heard him speak. And then when they did, people were shocked about how weak his voice sounded, quite frankly. But beyond that, what's very disturbing about this particular information, these tapes that we hear of him speaking, is that it goes in line with several other things that we have seen from him to show that, quite frankly, he's just as bit as evil as a Donald Trump is. He just does it with a more stern face, right? And so here is the thing: the fact that he would sit there and almost kind of brag that they were able to take control away. Trump was able to take control away from the scientists and have some sort of, coup d'etat, actually, as it relates to attacking the coronavirus in this nation. And now all of the world seeing the implications of that. When we all know that Donald Trump, this is the man that thought that we should actually inject people with bleach. Okay. This is someone who he's excited about having the ability to take control away from the scientists as it relates to attacking this disease. It's also the same person who earlier it was reported, specifically, it was his strategy to only provide PPE and specific help in the most urgent moments when this first sort of flared up in the spring to red states and specifically ignore blue states because they wouldn't support Donald Trump anyway. That is evil. That is evil. I'm just going to call it what it is. And if we are to ever get past this scourge, something that is killing Black people at more than 2 times the rate that it is killing white people, we have got to get Donald Trump and his merry band of evil, unqualified people that he have around him out of the White House. They don't care about you. They don't care about your lives. They don't care about this nation. They need to be gone.
Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver weighing in rather on the campaign and all the things that have been going on in these last final days before the election. I know a lot of people who support Donald Trump would dispute what you have to say, and we have to be clear that people are on both sides voting for him. But nevertheless, your opinions are always expressed here and always welcome. And I appreciate you all the time for coming on to give your perceptions of what's happening right there on in the battleground states as well as in America. The bottom line, Avis, there should be no red states or blue states.
Absolutely.
There should be the United States.
Agreed. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you always. We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. So the coronavirus continues to rise in America and throughout other countries in Europe. The problem that we're having is that we have not mitigated this virus, and the President of the United States still says we're rounding the curve. Joining me now is a public health expert with the George Washington University Milken Institute on Public Health. She's also a pediatrician, Dr. Yolanda Hancock. Where are we in terms of stopping this virus from rising and escalating? Because Dr. Anthony Fauci says the worst is about to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, when I hear the president say we're turning the curve, I'm like, yeah, towards a head-on collision. That's what we're turning the curve to. When we are looking at a daily average of around 70,000 new cases per day, that's close to where we were at the beginning of this pandemic back in March. When we look at Europe and look what's happening in France in terms of a lockdown, where you can only go to get essential food, medical visits, and an hour of exercise. Where in Russia, they're reaching 90% capacity in at least 16 regions within the country. Just as in March, what we saw happening in Europe transferred right over here into the US. We are well on our way to doing exactly the same thing again right now. It's disheartening to see the number of cases rising. Over at least 75% of the country has seen significant increase in terms of the number of COVID-19 cases.
And yet Germany and Canada have been able to mitigate this virus. And even though they're still on alert and watching things, they've been more compliant with following the science to safeguard lives. What's the problem here in the United States? And of course, I've got to ask you, Jared Kushner, who is there working with the President of the United States, it's been revealed now through a tape that he also made with an investigative journalist, revealing that the president actually set out to undermine his own scientists who are working on the White House coronavirus task force. How did you feel when you heard that?
Unfortunately, I wasn't surprised when at the beginning of this pandemic and this president was aware of how severe COVID-19 was, that it can impact children's health, that it was far worse than the flu in his own words. Any and everything else that is revealed is not surprising. We've seen him undermine his scientists in the middle of a press conference. So the fact that there was a purposeful undermining, muzzling, whatever words you want to use, it doesn't surprise me at all because that's how if nothing else, he's been consistent. And so it goes to the point that we have made on your show consistently: find trusted sources of information, refuse to allow a public health pandemic to be politicized, do the things you know you're supposed to do: wearing a mask, socially distancing, and avoiding crowded spaces, especially as we start to hunker down, as the temperatures go down and holidays approach. If we don't serve as our own rescue, no one will rescue us. That's the message that people should hear over and over again when they hear all these tapes being revealed. It should also influence how they vote come November 3rd.
Yeah, and I know you have a lot of concerns about what we're seeing throughout the nation, and there's some hot spots here. And one of the troubling things is that it's not a matter of running out of bed space or expanding, like tents if you need to in some states, but it's a matter of running out of healthcare workers to provide the care. You've
Absolutely.
talked to me about this before, where residents are being called in now, and they lack the training and expertise to deal with this virus.
Absolutely. We just lost a resident just a couple of weeks ago. An obstetrics and gynecology resident lost her life in her 20s. She lost her life before she could even finish her training to become an obstetrician gynecologist because she's on the front line. And the more the numbers increase, the more the volumes of patients increase. Not only does it put a burden on us as healthcare professionals to provide the care that patients deserve, but it puts our lives at risk. So as numbers increase, what you're also going to see is the mental health of healthcare professionals being just worn out. We have not yet had a chance to catch our breath collectively because we've been in the midst of this pandemic since March. And then you compound that with another surge of patients who are going to present not just with COVID, Mr. Wright, but we're talking a twindemic. So not only am I managing COVID, but guess what? The flu season is upon us. So I'm getting this from all angles, and my life is on the line, knowing how severe a COVID-19 infection can be. And the more you're exposed to it, the higher the likelihood of a significant infection.
Back with more after this. I've talked to people from Johns Hopkins University, and of course, they have the same assessment that you have. They are also looking at the numbers rising.
Mhm.
Like Dr. Anthony Fauci, we could see more than 100,000 more deaths, and I'm being conservative, if we don't turn this around.
Right.
Yet, getting back to the president, he says we're rounding the curve, and like you said, we're rounding the curve into something more sinister and uglier. But he talks about the fact that it's rising because of more testing. Uh, Tell me your explanation for that.
Lies, what is it? Alternate facts. That's what he's known to have to push out. No, it's not because of increased testing. There are two things that counter what he's saying. One, the fact that a lot of state-based and federally based testing facilities have now shut down, and the testing capacity has been transferred back over to the healthcare system. So even in my county, I live out here in the DMV, and our county has shifted testing back over to the healthcare space. They aren't doing as much testing, particularly free testing, as they were before. And you're seeing this across the country. Number two, the way that states are reporting out their positive tests are different. Initially, states reporting out their daily positive tests every single day, but a variety of states have now done this average daily positive reporting out, which one makes it difficult to track truly how many positive tests we're seeing from state to state. Two, it's hard for us to be able to truly know on a daily basis. We're at a point now where we need to know this information daily because things are changing daily. And if there isn't a federal requirement for consistent reporting so that we all have the same metrics, how do we go into the winter with a clear vision on how impactful COVID-19 is in every single state, city, and municipality?
I know it's all of us, but it's still impacting the Black American community to a far greater and deadlier way. What
Absolutely.
has to be done?
Absolutely. I mean, Blacks are dying at 3.5 times the rate of whites. Native Americans and Latinx community members are dying at 2.5 times the rate of whites. And it isn't simply because of disparities as it relates to diabetes and high blood pressure and obesity. It's because we're on the front lines. 75% of Black and Brown people do not have the option of telework. And with us having to be on the front lines and continuously exposed, and then our children in our households are exposed to us because we are on the front lines, and a parent's employment status serves as a significant risk factor for a child to develop COVID-19, and then Black and Brown children also disproportionately being the ones who are dying from COVID-19, it's hitting us on all angles, which makes it even more important for us collectively within Black and Brown communities to protect each other.
Finally, I know you got to go. This is not a hoax. This is real. We're even seeing concerns about the World Series championship team, the Los Angeles Dodgers, and the fact that a player actually ran out after testing COVID to celebrate. A lot of people talk about that. But look, when celebrations like that, and I use that as the backdrop because we're coming up against a very seasonal time of celebration, Thanksgiving, Christmas, your best advice as a doctor to families that are hungry and desperate for coming together during this holiday season? What should we do?
The first thing that I would tell them is that this is going to be the year of sacrifice. It already has been. There will be a phenomenal family gathering in 2021. Why risk having one of your loved ones not make it to 2021 by coming together in large gatherings? If you feel so compelled to come together, make sure everyone shows up with their COVID-19 test results. Don't assume that because they don't cough, they don't have a fever, that they look healthy, that somehow that is your litmus test for determining that your family member does or does not have COVID-19. When 80% of individuals are either mildly or completely asymptomatic, none of us knows who actually has COVID. So unless they're showing up with some test results within the past 2 days, they can't come and celebrate. No one gets turkey without a test result.
That goes for mother, father, sister, brother.
Grandma and grandpa.
All right, Dr. Yolanda Hancock, I appreciate you so much. She is public health expert with the Milken Institute of Public Health at the George Washington University and a pediatrician extraordinaire. I know you're going to go do some rounds. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
We're coming back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. So we're focusing now on what's unfolding in Philadelphia. A lot of disturbing situations going on since the police-involved shooting death of Walter Wallace Jr. Joining me now is former MSNBC anchor and reporter Monique Braxton. She was also an anchor and reporter there in Philadelphia in her former days, and now she has Monique Braxton Media, a good friend of mine as well. Monique, thank you for joining us today from Philadelphia. And I guess we should start with the latest news that's unfolded there. It's quite disturbing what police found last night, a truck full of explosives. What's that all about?
You know, Kelly, the lawlessness in the city, which really has nothing to do with the death of Walter Wallace Jr., is disturbing right now for just about everybody that I've talked to. Last night, police discovered, after receiving a tip, that there was a van on Ben Franklin Parkway, an iconic part of the city, just a few blocks from City Hall. It was loaded with explosives and also propane tanks. The intent not known. We also don't know now if someone has been arrested, but nonetheless, the ATF was called in, the bomb squad was called in, And this follows another night of looting and destruction over a few different neighborhoods in the city. I will tell you that also last night, the mayor issued a 9 p.m. curfew. He told businesses, grocery stores, pharmacies that they could operate on a delivery basis only, but do what they needed to do to secure their establishments.
You know, Monique, let's drill down to what started this. And this was the unfortunate and tragic death of Walter Wallace Jr. Take me through the steps that led to his death and subsequently to that, what's going on in terms of how the family is responding to the violence and the looting and the protest.
On Monday, the family of Walter Wallace Jr. said they called police asking for an ambulance. We've also learned that there were 3 calls made from this home that day. Walter Wallace came out, he had a knife, he was walking towards police officers. His mother was trying to calm him down. And we should say, Kelly, our hearts go out to the Wallace family.
Yeah.
I can't imagine watching police kill my son. And as he approached 2 police officers, they fired about 14 shots. Yesterday, I learned that there were about 7 or 8 of those bullets that did hit Walter Wallace. An officer scooped him up into a vehicle, took him to the hospital, and there he was pronounced dead. We've also learned that Walter Wallace's mother said to police, "Don't shoot my son, he's having a mental episode." I also learned overnight that his fiance, who just gave birth to a baby yesterday, called out, "He's bipolar, he is sick, please don't shoot him." But you know, the video now has been played all across the country, and you just shake your head because what do you say to young children? What do you say to young Black men when you're trying to help them cope with the senseless murders and devaluing of life? But the police are trained to de-escalate. They're trained to shoot to kill. A lot of questions have come up, Kelly. Could they have de-escalated the situation a little bit better? Why didn't they shoot him in the hand where he was holding the knife? Why didn't they shoot him in the leg? So the police commissioner has said only 1/3 of the officers in Philadelphia have tasers or stun guns. She has asked for additional funding so that all police officers will have that should they need to subdue someone who may be having a mental episode. She's also said that the 2 officers that shot and killed Wallace did not have tasers. So that's created a whole nother discussion here. The family is also called for the looting to stop. His father, his uncle have said this has nothing to do with what's gone on. And then you have the looting going on in the neighborhood, maybe 15 blocks away. You also have the looting going on across town, a 30 to 40-minute drive. Opportunists are taking advantage of the situation. And it's not what Philadelphia is about.
I want to talk to you more about that. Monique Braxton with me right now. Monique, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about what Philadelphia is truly about and how it can move forward beyond this tragic set of circumstances involving the tragic death of Walter Wallace Jr. Back in with more after this. Welcome back to the program. I'm talking to my good friend, Monique Braxton, owner of Monique Braxton Media. She is a former anchor for MSNBC, as well as a former anchor and reporter in the Philadelphia area. Monique, throughout your career there in Philadelphia, you've become like a community ambassador, if you will. You're always there for a lot of events that are philanthropic, as well as community service. So I thought it would be good to have you on to talk about what Philadelphia is truly all about, beyond the tragic situation involving the death of Walter Wallace Jr. How does this city move forward now?
I think it's going to be very difficult. You know, I think the mayor said yesterday that he really hasn't seen anything like this. We have a mayor that has a heart for people of color. As you know, we're a sanctuary city. You have organizations here that I'm part of that raise scholarship money so that young women, young men can go to college and aspire and achieve their dreams. Philadelphia is known as the city of brotherly love, but it's also been called the city of sisterly affection. And what we're seeing play out right now on TV, videos, surveillance videos, there were so many different angles the other night when Wallace was killed. That is not what the city is about. People say it's a city set on several different hills. People in all the neighborhoods of this town, some of them have children, 2 or 3 generations who live on the same block. It's a melting pot. But right now, it is a city that's facing racism. It's a city that's facing the pandemic. You have elected city officials who are trying to figure out what can we do to change what is playing out on TV now in our city. Until now, you hadn't seen video like this coming from Philadelphia. You have people who are 1 or 2 generations removed from Southern heritage, meaning their grandmothers, some of their parents moved to Philadelphia from the South. So you've got some of that Southern blend, that Southern hospitality. Philly is known for its boxing. Muhammad Ali used to live here. Joe Frazier also lived here all of his life. You have other entertainers who made it big internationally and have come back to live in the city, like Patti LaBelle, Teddy Pendergrass, Grover Washington. It's also a city known for its food because of the microcosm of generations of people, the multiculturalism, and then also it's a city based on history. You have the Independence Hall area, Declaration of Independence, big at the National Constitution Center. You have the Liberty Bell here. So people come here, tourists come here around the year to learn about how America was founded. George Washington's funeral was also here. People are just drawn to Philadelphia because it's a vibrant city. And what you're seeing play out on TV right now, for example, outside of the police district, that's where people marched the night of the killing of Wallace. And we're not known for police with shields in front of their faces guarding a police district. We're not known for that. And so you're seeing a city of 2 tales right now, or a tale of 2 cities. And it's disheartening because it's not what this city is about. I chose to live here. I've been here since 2000. I've raised my son and my stepson here. We've had to have a lot of difficult conversations. What happens if you're stopped by the police? What do you say? What do you do? And what do you not do when you feel intimidated and it's because of the color of your skin? So there needs to be a lot of training right now. We need some sensitivity and multicultural training, more than just diversity and inclusion. We need to have thoughts on and education on what different cultures are like in this city so that we can heal.
The healing that has to unfold in Philadelphia must begin now. And that is to, one, stop the looting and stop the violence that's been going on in the wake of the death of Walter Wallace Jr. Now, the DA in Philadelphia, the DA is certainly someone who's looking at this case.
Mm-hmm.
What do we know so far about the 2 police officers involved? I understand the actual police union is saying release the body cam information.
Yes.
So tell us about the process and going forward from a legal standpoint, what we're anticipating.
District Attorney Larry Krasner is known for being very progressive. He has said from the top, we're going to have a thorough investigation. We're not going into this taking sides, but just overnight alone, 30 ATMs were exploded. In June, you may recall a man died trying to blow up an ATM. You've had more than 175 people arrested. 50 officers have been injured. 4 people have been wounded at the looting scenes. 2 of those people are teenagers, Kelly, and then 9 police vehicles were damaged. On top of that, the police commissioner has said they were throwing projectiles at my men and women. Even an appearance of blood. Now, it could have been red dye, a liquid that had been dyed, but she said it appeared that blood was being thrown at the officers. So yesterday, DA Krasner announced he's arrested the person who was driving the truck. It was a black pickup truck or a dark colored pickup truck into the police line the other night. That female officer who was struck has a broken leg. She's in stable condition. And I must admit to you, as someone who is from Virginia, it reminded me of when James Fields Jr., I believe is his name, when he drove his car into the crowd of peaceful protesters in Charlottesville. So how is that any different? Were you trying to kill a police officer as the cameras were rolling? So Krasner has arrested that person. And he says, he's not playing with this. How can you, when you see an African-American man on camera being shot to death by 2 police officers?
The reason why I wanted to bring you on is because all of this, of course, has now gone into the focus of the national election, the presidential election. We're just days away from that. We heard President Donald Trump talking about this yesterday when he was asked a question about it. He, of course, returned to his stance that we need law and order. And then he also criticized his opposing candidate, Joe Biden, stating that Joe Biden didn't come out and condemn the violence. And that's not true. Joe Biden did condemn the looting and the violence going on. But Joe Biden also stated that if he's elected president, he would like to move forward to bring healing to Philadelphia and also to heal systemic racism in any regard. So the fact that this has come front and center into a presidential election, do you think it will have some sway on voters who are undecided or voters who are already, looking at this and stating, well, I'm concerned about this. How do I vote now?
My first concern the other night when I watched it play out was, oh God, we've been working so hard just to get young people to vote and to get people to vote who have never felt like their vote mattered. So the other day I rode to 2 different polling places and I was just jubilant because the lines were 2 blocks long. So I don't think this is going to deter people from voting, but no doubt, Kelly, as everyone expected, it's become a political issue. As you know, Vice President Biden, he considers Philadelphia hometown. His headquarters are here. He has a very large operation now out of Delaware in downtown Wilmington at the DuPont Hotel. He's lived not far from there for decades, but no question that we all knew that President Trump was going to make this a political issue. Criticizing the governor because he's a Democrat, criticizing the mayor because he's a Democrat. He's criticized them from the very beginning. So why would it change now? I think that Vice President Biden's statement was very on point. As he has said from the beginning, I don't agree with the looting and the violence, but we must come together and we must heal, as you've mentioned, Kelly. So is it bad that it's happened the week before an election? Absolutely. But do I still have hope for the city of Philadelphia and that it will heal? Definitely.
Very unfortunate set of circumstances, very tragic indeed. And certainly it underscores the need for police reform in all phases. Monique Braxton, thank you as always. Thank you for investing the time this day to actually talk about a very serious case unfolding before our very eyes nationally, right there in the heart of Philadelphia. We hope that things can turn around quickly and that healing can be achieved. And obviously some change, systemic changes that need to take place. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
We'll be back with more after this. And welcome back. I'd like to thank all of the guests who appeared on tonight's program, and I especially want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out to watch. You know how much I appreciate you. In closing, my final word is this. As we see what's unfolding in Philadelphia, young people out in the streets protesting, some violently and some rioting, that must stop. It's important to turn it all around and protest by showing up at the polls to vote. That's how we do it. Just as I said at the top of the show, quoting John Lewis, who talked about stirring up good trouble is actually getting out to say something and do something by being able to exercise your right to vote. In closing tonight, we leave you with the song from Jermaine Dupri and Jonte Austin, and I'm so happy they were on last night's program to debut the song Change. And with their permission, we're showing that yet again because of the message that it has for all Black Americans, young and old, to get out and vote. Finally, I hope you've been righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading knowledge, love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
These are tough times we live in, but still we can't just give in. We must stand tall and live strong. It's up to the youth to live on.
And carry this torch we pass down. You see, I know it's not the last round. In the next generation, my faith is unwavering.
My confidence in you is unshakable, because I know that you're willing and far beyond capable of doing all that must be done. But to do it all, we must be as one.
Life can be better than most of us dream.
Yeah.
So once you take the reins, believe in your greatness which lies within.
And for the better, this world will change.
I see that you want it. I see that you're working for it. So don't take no days off. It's gonna pay off. I see that you love it. I want you to know that before you can see it, you gotta believe it. You're the generation of tomorrow. The pursuit starts today, and all time is borrowed. So you have found the ways. You are not. Oh, I repeat, you are not. Put on the search and lose. And you are hot. Yeah, I repeat it, but you are hot. So do what you do, and we gon' do it big. We gon' make a scene. We gon' take the doubters, make them all believe. We gon' be the change that we wanna see. We're not taking average, chasing legend status. We can have the world, we can have it all. Nothing is too big, nothing is too small. We can be the change that we wanna see. We're not taking average, chasing legend status. Oh no, no, I see that it's in your heart. I see that it's in your heart. I feel it, I feel your desire. It only takes one spark. It only takes one spark to set it on fire. You're the generation of tomorrow. But the work starts today. And all time is borrowed. So there's no time to wait. You and I, yeah, I repeat, you and I. Put on this earth to lose. And you are hot. Yeah, I repeat it. You are hot. So do what you do. Yeah. And we gon' do it big. We gon' make a scene. We gon' take the dollars. Make them all believe. We gon' be the change that we wanna see. We're not taking orders. Chasing legend status. We can have the world. We can have it all. Nothing is too big. Nothing is too small. We can be the change that we wanna see. We're not taking average. No, chasing legend status. Let's go.